Leo Preha, Leo Preha is our CEO. He is in transit to go meet with about 150 agents in Southern California. So he's going to be joining me on this webinar this morning. We wanted to make sure you had the latest. So as we make this transition, because we know today New Jersey goes live with their buyer broker. We know other states have already gone live, and many of you are prepping. You are in that ready, set mode. So definitely, we are so thrilled you're here. Leo, are you available? Shall we just jump right into it?
I am. So just for the record, I'm in an Uber using my cell phone hotspot, but Holly will be driving the bus, but I am available. And just as an FYI, hanging there, I know there's a lot of media coverage. There's a lot of misinformation, but just so you guys know, Tom Ferry and I recorded a very specific, very detailed video yesterday that's going to be dropped, and Housing Wire is covering it in quite detail, debunking a lot of the misinformation that Holly's going to articulate very clearly. And just so you know, obviously this can be shared completely once it's recorded, but this presentation that you're seeing will be available to you all, and you guys will be able to articulate how to move forward. Let's jump right into it.
Absolutely. So I think the biggest thing that Leo and I wanted to convey is, look, we didn't create this. We didn't create the rules, but we are absolutely going to navigate a path forward with what's been given to us. I know, Leo, you're so passionate about everything we've been talking about, and actually getting quite vocal with other industry leaders to help them join us. Here at Inman, Leo was on stage this week and really was called folks out. And so want to let you know specifically, we've had 2 other companies join us with regard to not offering broker-to-broker compensation. And so let's talk about that, because I know this has been the biggest headline of the week. We all still see folks living in what was. What was is agents would go out and negotiate at the time of listing the entire package, right? They would negotiate their fee as a listing agent, as well as the buyer compensation fee from the seller, and it was all a package deal. Well, quite frankly, that's exactly what got us into trouble with the antitrust lawsuit. That's exactly what led us down this path. And so want to pause right there and put into your mind, we're going to decouple everything with regard to commission. When you go out to take a listing this afternoon, I want you to think about what your fee is. Whatever that amount is it a fixed rate? Is it a percentage of the sales price? Whatever it might be, the seller needs to determine what could be offered in the next. And so it becomes really, really important that we negotiate our fee, but the seller has the say in what is offered a buyer. Leo, you want to jump in here? I love Uber and I love Wi-Fi in Uber. I think the
So
biggest,
very
go
important.
ahead.
No, that's the crux of it, right? Broker-to-broker compensation is no longer allowed anywhere on the MLS, and we were middlemaning commissions. So think about it. If you commingle the money that goes from the seller to the listing agent, and then we were sharing it out to agents, well, the thing is seller to pay listing agent directly, seller to pay buyer agent directly. So again, I keep saying this on a lot of conversations. It feels like semantics is like, well, it's just specific words. Yes, but the difference is future litigation versus not. The core of the plaintiff's attorney litigation against our industry was that the seller was not being able to participate in the negotiation. The class of people who sued the industry were a seller class. So we're just making sure that as the clock ticks to August 17th, we don't continue doing the same thing that was litigated. Sellers with EXP can absolutely compensate a buyer's agent, but it's the differences of saying the seller to offer the compensation or credit the compensation to the buyer agent directly. So it seems like just nuance, but it's at the core of what's happening with the litigation.
It's so true. And guys, I love these questions that are coming across on chat, so don't stop. So Jamil, yes, we absolutely can ask the seller if they want to offer compensation and what that would look like. And so I'm using the EXP listing agreement. That's what's being pulled up right now. And so I'm going to drop the FAQ in our chat here, and make sure that you all have it. This is the FAQ that we've shared out. It's got links to all of the EXP documents that we have dropped so far that are live in SkySlope forms for you. And so when you look at our EXP form, basically listing broker compensation, your first strategy, negotiate your compensation, whatever that looks like. It could be a set amount or it could be a percentage of the gross. We also recognize some of you may have other things that you do, administrative fees, etc. So we left that box for other. That's for you. Now, this is where strategy comes into play, and I get a little excited, right? Unrepresented buyers. I can see a future for those of you who are in dual agency states where dual agency starts to fall away. I can see many unrepresented buyers coming forward saying, hey, I don't want to pay for a buyer's broker. I want to go directly to the listing agent. I think I can get a better deal. Okay, that's fine. I want you to negotiate straight up front. Hey, seller, this is my fee if I list and sell your house, right? If the buyer comes through a representation, right? That's the first part of section 5. If a buyer comes to us that's unrepresented, I'm still going to be your agent solely, only you. But in that instance, I'm going to have to do paperwork to make sure you're covered and make sure the transaction goes smoothly. And I'm going to charge an additional fee for that. And that total fee is exactly what would be put in on that lower line. Broker compensation shall be. So that's if I represent you and the buyer is unrepresented. Does that make sense? And so this is, I want you to think about it this way. Back in the day, yesterday, for sale by owners, if you are representing a buyer, we didn't represent the seller. And so as a result, this is the same thing. We don't represent the buyer. This is just a reverse of that. So it's really, really a cool opportunity. Now, before I go any further, I see a question. If you've got a transaction coordinator fee, yes, that would go in other, right? The fee needs to be something that is over and above what is normally considered in your commission or your compensation, okay? And no, the additional fee is not a buyer agent fee. This is purely on the listing side, Nina. It's such a great question, and I really appreciate you driving for clarification there. So awesome, awesome, awesome. And so the name of the EXP listing agreement in SkySlope is the exclusive authorization and right to sell. Leo, you want to add anything here?
No, it's if you see the difference in our new listing agreement, the listing compensation is for your services rendered, the unrepresented portion, because again, I would encourage you all on the listing presentation to have your exact buyer presentation with you. All of us are creating buyer presentations that probably were not part of your script. When you explain the unrepresented buyer paragraph, make sure to articulate with the new rule change, there will be parties that are choosing to be unrepresented, and I need to understand how do you want me to handle that? Because, and part of your presentation, you should have the list of 105 things that must be completed in order to do the buy side. Because one of the things that the media is making unclear, it's like someone's unrepresented, they want to write an offer, great. Who pays for what? And so that's why we made it super clear. And Jamil and everybody's asking where the buy side seller directed compensation goes. We will get to it. So I promise you, but it's very clear that this part articulates that part.
Absolutely. Such good questions, guys. And so, Greg, you're asking, do listing agreements need to be done? So if you have a current active listing right now, and you may not get a buyer before the buyer compensation comes out of the MLS, we have created an addendum to the listing agreement that is in SkySlope currently for you. And it explains all of this. It allows you to put in the unrepresented buyer. It allows you to break apart that compensation and ask, hey, do we want to offer something? Now, let's talk about strategy number 2, because this becomes really important as you look at everything. Strategy 2 is seller concessions, right? Seller strategy for getting their house sold. And this is what we're seeing a lot in the media. How am I going to get my house sold? How will buyers know that I'm willing to work with you? Y'all, you put a sign in the yard. That is what denotes that a seller is willing to sell. They put a sign in the yard. That's it, right? You drive by for sale by owners, they're willing to sell. They want to work with buyers. The key to the kingdom here is sellers are negotiating on everything right now. They're negotiating on potentially price. They're negotiating on home warranties or other things in the contract, washer and dryer, maybe closing costs. The buyer compensation can be one of those pieces. And when you look at the EXP employment agreement, the exclusive authorization and right to sell, it's really important. We laid it out so that we can have the conversation with the seller of, hey, do you want to offer concessions up front? Or do you want to see who comes and what they ask for? It's a mindset shift. Before, we had to lock in the seller to a specific number. Now, the seller has the opportunity based on the buyer in front of them, the timing of the offer, the timing of close, the conditions of the offer, to determine what's best for them and their family. That's the king's position. We now get to play chess at a much higher level in negotiating strategy with our sellers. Now, I want to make sure that everybody understands. Section 21 are additional terms. That's on our listing agreement. If you have a seller who is very focused, they want to offer concessions, they want to offer compensation to any buyer's agent that walks through the door, you can write it in there. Leo, go ahead and jump in.
So there is also another form that we'll touch on, but in paragraph 21, if your seller is instructing you to say, hey, I've sold many homes, I understand the value of the marketing message that is compensation directly to a buyer, you can write in section 21, seller offers X%, X dollars to a buyer broker. This is where you can communicate off the MLS, just like everybody else is talking about in all the forums. If you get a phone call and you're following the rules in your local MLS, meaning not in the remarks on the MLS, at least 2 clicks from the link in the website, right? This is where a lot of people are going to get themselves in trouble. Any website that has IDX MLS information has to be 2 clicks. But right in there, you can write it right in the additional terms. Because again, the key is that the plaintiff's attorney's case was that the sellers were not being able to negotiate or dictate the terms. This allows you to negotiate your fee. And if the seller chooses to offer buyer compensation directly to the buyer broker, you can put it right in there with exact. And again, there could be multiple iterations of this. A seller can say, yes, I'm open to it, bring it to me and we'll negotiate it. Or here's the amount I'm willing to offer or the percentage I'm willing to offer. This puts the seller and yourself in the driver position, and you are no longer the middleman administering, hey, I'm going to collect X and then split it, right? Because, and just so you guys know, there's going to be equal power to buyers agents who can articulate their value. How many of you have shown a property and what the co-broke was offering is a lot less than your time and value is worth? So now you can actually sit with your buyer and have that be part of the negotiation because you've got a valid value proposition that you were able to articulate during your buyer's presentation. And let's not forget, probably one of the most important parts, which I've been articulating as much as possible. You are only allowed to collect what's in your buyer representation agreement. So if even the other side is offering more than what's in your buyer agreement, you can't even collect it. So that's where there's a big mindset shift of like, let's get out of this. Hey, this is what's available. This is no different. And this is a script I've been sharing with people. How many times have you gotten a call from a buyer's agent and said, hey, I see it's listed for X, but will you take less than list? Will you take a 90-day close? Will you accept a 2-month rent back? I want the hot tub that is not in the conveyable section. And what do we all say? put it in the offer. It is negotiable.
At the end of the day, everything becomes negotiable. And I think the biggest key here is seller authorization. If the seller says, yes, I'm willing to leave the dog, I'm willing to do the washer dryer, put it in additional terms. They may change their mind. They may go, you know what, I'm totally taking the dog. It's the same with offer of compensation. It's the same with any kind of concessions. We need to give the seller flexibility. And this is strategy regarding negotiating, right? Look at your markets. They're so local, they're so specific, even within price ranges, and that becomes an opportunity. Okay, so let's break it down. This is a great script that we've been sharing. We borrowed from a great trainer, Barb Betts, on the East Coast. Sometimes buyers will need assistance financing their costs. This is something that you can utilize with sellers who are like, hey, I don't understand. Why is the industry? What are these news headlines? This is a great script for you all to use in, hey, this is what I charge. You're agreeing to that. Great. We've got that signed. We want to make sure that we've got flexibility. So here we go. I want you to work out a net sheet every time you meet with the seller. I strongly recommend this as a best practice because if the sellers, it's not an emotional sale, it's a business transaction. And business is about the bottom line when you go to sell. And with the sellers, it's all about net. At time of listing, do net proceeds and give them ranges, give them ideas of, hey, if we offer this, hey, if we do this, that way it starts to get in their mind what it looks like. I will tell you the number of agents that you'll go up against that don't do this is amazing. People aren't putting in the extra work. If you all take a moment and do this, and this is what's exciting. Later this week, our listing kit and listing toolbox is going to be released. We've got a couple of different net proceed sheets styles that we're releasing to you to use, customize, and that way you can show up best prepared with your clients as we go forward. Now, multiple offers, we also will have a form for you to fill out there to showcase that net bottom line for your sellers so they can make good choices. And finally, concession or credit, compensation, it all comes out in the net. Leo, anything you want to add here?
Again, this is a very important talk track that has been being said out loud a bunch. It's all about seller net execution. It is your fiduciary responsibility when you sit with a seller to explain and to keep you as compliant as possible. This is what I'm suggesting you do. This is how the world worked prior to August 17th. This is how the world works after August 17th. So it's not about our feelings. These are the rule changes and how we're implementing them. And it's important that when you show comps and say, this home sold for $500,000, that you actually walk through and say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, there was actually concessions paid out. And this is the net execution. And this is how we're going to price your property. So it's super important that we are very specific on the specifics.
I love this question, Joyce, that you brought up. Do you have to reject the offer if the seller's not willing to pay a buyer's agent? No, negotiate it. Like my negotiating strategy personally has always been never be the first one to leave the table. You can always negotiate for something different because you're negotiating either time or money. And so some people have time, some people have money. What's most important to them? And so if the seller's like, yeah, I'm definitely not paying a buyer's agent. Okay, cool. What's more important to you? Do we want to wait for the next offer? Or let's look at our net, because sometimes paying a buyer's agent and what it will net long term makes the seller more money than staying on the market for a couple of more days, weeks, months, whatever, and what they lose in that flexibility. So a lot of things to consider in that respect. Now, let's talk about advertising, because I've seen a whole bunch of questions on this. This is what I would say with regard to offer of compensation or concessions to a buyer or buyer broker. We can't have it in the MLS. The MLS rules are starting to roll out nationally and go into effect. And as Leo said earlier, it's a 2-click rule, right? So if you've got the MLS listing that is now fed onto your website, but if somebody clicks on it and it takes it back to MLS, that's only 1 click. It's not far enough removed. So if you're going to offer compensation, it needs to be very removed. Now, some people are saying, hey, can I put it on a sign writer? Sure. Does your seller want that? It's kind of like saying home warranty sign writers. You can put that on your sign, of course. But do you want to? Does your seller want to? Hot tub conveys, washer and dryer included. Think of it that way, because at the end of the day, if a sign is in the yard, the seller is willing to work. They want to get their house sold. This is a paradigm shift that is going to be itchy scratchy. Leo's been talking about messy in the middle the last few weeks. This is it, and we're going to be okay. So what I would say is, hey, offer of compensation. Option one is, hey, buyer, write anything you want in the offer and we'll negotiate it. Let's go. That's one strategy to convey, and that we'll probably get to that. The other option is if your seller absolutely wants to offer compensation, we have a form for that. It's the seller direct pay to a buyer broker. It's live in SkySlope, and you can also find it on the FAQ. I'm going to drop that here again for you all. And that allows you to do a offer of compensation. Now, this is the thing. You may have a seller who says, I want to make sure everybody knows I'm willing to offer whatever percent or flat fee, and whatever that seller determines. And you can give this out like Halloween candy to anybody that calls. Okay, that form is escrow instructions. So if that buyer's agent signs that form, seller offers them a percentage, and then a contract is agreed upon, the seller has basically given a unilateral offer of compensation. That is the feel-good bridge to get us to next. That form is available, and you can absolutely do this. And yes, Denise or Dennis, this is being recorded. You can watch it as many times as you'd like. So
Pause right
at the
there,
end of the
Holly. I want to
day,
jump in with a couple things.
yep, go.
So one of the reasons we're obsessed with this and we're being so clear and so articulate, and we'll say it as many times as it needs to be said, it's about enforceability of the rules, guys. Holly and I didn't just wake up one day and say, hey, we just want to do this for fun. We woke up a couple of weeks ago and said half the states we operate in have not given us a single new form, period. And the other half have rolled out stuff that is actually contradictory to the settlement. So some of you are asking, can we use the local stuff? Some states are nailing it. Austin, if you're in Austin, Austin killed it. But there's others that literally are allowing the stuff that got us in trouble in the first place. So we're saying, if you want to use the local stuff, reach out to your broker and we will actually tell you how to fill it out correctly. Or you can use ours and then we know it's correct. But hear this loud and clear. The MLSs turn this into a massive revenue generator on your backs. First infraction in some MLSs is we're hearing as high as $2,500 for any reference to broker compensation on the MLS. No warning, automatically added to your bill. One MLS told us $5,000 to the agent, $7,500 to the broker. Another MLS told us 3 strikes and the agent is kicked out of the MLS. This is why we're spending so much time and being so specific. Guys, if there's agents who mess this up, depending on the MLS they belong to, they will no longer be able to participate in the MLS. That is very, very serious. Somebody asked, is the Zillow touring agreement okay? And the answer is it depends on your state. We're getting some responses from MLSs. Again, the MLS that you belong to is the one we're most concerned about. We're telling us that they have a problem with it. If you're in one of those MLSs, message me on Workplace. I am working directly with Zillow because we are of the opinion, if you like the touring agreement, use it. If you don't want to use the Zillow touring agreement, I have Zillow's direct blessing for you to use the EXP buyer broker agreement. They've blessed it. And if your Zillow representative tells you otherwise, reach out to me directly and I will take care of it personally with the C-suite of Zillow.
I think what I love about the questions we're getting and how we're going forward, you all, because there's a lot of questions of which form do I use? Do I use my local association or do I use EXPs? We want to give you choice. We want to give you something that is so seamless to have a conversation with a seller or buyer that it makes your job easier. We recognize there's a lot of friction right now because of the unknown and how we go forward. And I think that that's the thing that we're seeking to remove from your life right now is friction and angst. That's why we rolled out these forms. It's not to compete with, but to make your life better. So if you like your local form, okay. If you like our form, okay. We're going to have your back either way. And that's what I want you to know. So let's talk about the direct compensation from seller. This form is in SkySlope, and I've had a couple really good questions. You absolutely can use this at time of listing, or you could use it at time of contract. It's up to you. It's up to the seller. It's one of those forms designed to keep us, we don't want to be the middleman. We very much want to empower a seller to negotiate. And of course, you are there with them. As Leo said in the beginning, we are walking side by side with our clients. We're going to help them strategize and negotiate. We're not leaving them to the wind, but rather we're helping them interpret what is best for their family and giving them options. That is the best we can possibly do. So this form is really designed direct from seller to buyer's broker. There's a length on the agreement. So it could be, a 30-day window. It could be a 1-week window, depending on what the seller wants. And so it also confirms there's no agency between the seller and that buyer's broker, because at EXP, we don't do sub-agency with other companies. You're either with us or you're not in that kind of respect. So we want to be very thoughtful around our agency relationships. Now I'm going to pause here because some of my dual agency states, I see you popping up. Remember, listing broker fee is paid by the seller, and that's pre-negotiated at time of listing. The buyer broker, if you've got somebody who calls and says, oh, I totally want to see that house, you get to determine what you want to do. And we're going to go into that here a little bit more. So this is a direct compensation form. It's buyer specific. Yes, Melanie, it's ideal from the seller to the buyer broker. So let's talk about representing a buyer on your listing. The first question I'm always going to ask is, do you want to? See, there's some sellers that you don't want to represent the other side, because then you've got this duty of confidentiality and accounting, reasonable skill and care, obviously disclosure. But sometimes in those things, in that confidentiality specifically, we can't share with someone what the other side is thinking. And that becomes really tricky in a dual agency situation. So in that instance, if I have the pleasure of representing Leo on a purchase in Arizona, and he says, okay, Holly, I'm willing to pay over list. We've got to be in. I'm super excited about spending the winter in Arizona. It's going to be amazing. And he wants to write on my listing. And I know my sellers are willing to come down 20 grand because they've got to get gone. But Leo's willing to pay over list. I can't tell either that negotiating strategy. I literally have to sit back and let them go. So I may not want to represent a buyer on my listing. Also, did the seller give you permission? That's like a whole nother conversation that we've always supposed to be having, but we really get that opportunity now. And that's why we're really accentuating the positive on the unrepresented buyer. Like, hey, I'm going to get paid for doing this paperwork, taking extra time and making sure your deal goes flawlessly on both sides. I'm not going to represent that person. I'm disclosing that I'm not their agent, and they should totally go get an agent, but they hit their head. They think they know everything. They went to Google, so they're going to buy your house. That's possible. Now, let's talk about this. Buyer broker not required when you're showing your own listing. It's not required when you're doing an open house. It's not required when you're answering a sign call because you're showing your own listing. What gets tricky is if you start to go down the path of educating the buyer on how to make an offer, educating the buyer on prices in the area, and you start to act and talk like an agent for them on their behalf, you're going to need a buyer broker. Does that make sense? Now, I love this question, Marguerite. If they're represented by another EXP agent, that EXP agent should have a buyer broker agreement. You have your listing agreement to get paid. That EXP agent has their agreement to get paid. It all works out. So really, really good questions. Now, George, I love this question. Thank you. And it's something we've been kind of wrestling with. Is a buyer broker agreement transferable within our brokerage if I pass it on to another agent? Potentially. Let's talk about best practices because this is a bit of an unknown depending on the MLS you work in. If I go out of town and Leo is covering for me, and I've got a buyer broker agreement with you, George, and Leo's covering for me, and you call and you're like, oh my gosh, totally have to see this house for my family. We may encourage you to use that single property buyer broker to cover both Leo as well as myself, because we're not sure on implementation if we're going to see, because this is all self-reporting and tattletales. And so if another agent says, oh, I saw Leo showing George, George is Holly's client, Leo doesn't have assigned anything, I'm turning him in and he gets fined. We've got a little bit of an unknown here. And so right now, safe to say, use the single property buyer broker to cover for that day and time and put both agents' names on it. Super, super great conversation, guys. I really appreciate it. Leo, do you
And
have
by the
anything
way,
here?
yeah, no, this is super important, relevant to understand that this is a fluid situation, day by day, hour by hour, market by market. And the best example is a month ago, CRMLS had come out with a field that you could literally put a dollar or percentage for seller concessions, seller concessions. Last Monday, they turned around and pulled it and just made it yes or no. So the reason that's important is market by market, it's about what they will let be approved, right? So we are seeing some markets saying that the Zillow touring agreement, and by the way, the state of Florida came out with their own touring agreement, which is for showing property with no compensation, but says at the time of contract there will be compensation. Some states are all in on it, and then other states are saying not allowed. This is the problem with the settlement itself. It is ambiguous, right? One paragraph 19 is very specific, and then paragraph 32 contradicts itself. So this is where we are being left to, as a company, make a business decision on how we interpret it and how we protect ourselves. And I said it in March, I said it in May, and I've been saying it every single time I'm in front of a camera. This is day by day. If you have questions, reach out to the broker team. And by the way, this is one of the powerful things about being with an established, robust platform that actually has the staff and the knowledge to weather this storm. Is I can tell you the small companies literally have no idea what's what and how to answer their agents' questions. So we have your back through all of this, and we will figure this out together. But just assume that it's day by day. You guys will have different things you're being told by your MLSs, which are in sometimes in direct contrast with what the associations are doing, which is mind-boggling. The body that creates the forms is not talking or contradicting with the MLS, who will enforce it with a penalty to you all. So again, we got to hang in there, but this is part of the process.
Okay, a couple of really good questions that came across and I want to bring to everybody's attention. Dave, absolutely love this question. As far as a listing agent working with an unrepresented buyer, is there any liability with offering them buyer docs from SkySlope? So let's pause there. If you have already signed that buyer customer disclosure, right, the unrepresented customer form, and they're making an offer, then yeah, absolutely. You're giving the seller disclosure statement, you're giving them other things because the seller would be required to do that contractually. But if you are just showing a property because a buyer called on your listing and that is not something that they would get unless they had engaged an agent, we might want to be very cautious because anything that's public record, cool, give to them. If it's not public record and they'd almost need an agent to get to it and it's not required up front, then I would probably hold, because then you start to get into that gray area of what is an agent? Am I working for you? What can I expect from you? And it gets a little fuzzy. And I really, our agency knowledge, if you're going to do anything over the course of the next 90 days, bone up on your state agency laws, because understanding what you may and may not do according to local legislation, Department of Real Estate, is really going to be key in how we exercise best practices, how we go forward. and I'll share openly, there are some folks who are quite confused about agency, usually in other brokerages, sometimes attorneys, because they want to make a level playing field for all. But when you know agency, when you know your contracts inside and out, that's all you need to know to really do a good job on behalf of your client. So love, love, love this. Now, Ben, you're asking a great question, and I'll go to the next slide real here. But listing agents, if an MLS is required BBA to be signed prior to touring, then doesn't it seem unreasonable for us to request? So I'm assuming you're asking as far as a listing agent. Look, I personally, as a listing agent, would not want to be in the position of enforcement. My goal is to get my house, the listing sold for my seller. So if you can fog a mirror, you having a buyer broker agreement is not my problem. Please bring your buyer. I'm willing to work with anybody that walks through the door that has a real estate license in my state, and let's see if we can put a deal together. Because the buyer broker agreement is really about how you're going to get paid. So in my mind, it's not my problem. I'm not here to enforce the settlement. That's the MLS's job. My job is to get the property sold. So I would strongly encourage not to make gathering buyer broker agreements from the other side a barrier to walking through your house. Just me. It's really, really crazy. Okay, so buyer direct compensation from seller, we've talked about, representing a buyer on my listing, buyer scripts and services. So let's break this down. When do I need it? When do I not? If somebody calls you on your sign, or you get an internet search, or you're setting them up on an MLS drip campaign, you do not need a buyer broker signed. You're just sending information, right? You're just sending information like, hey, this is what's going on in the community. This is what's going on. But now let's transition to that first showing. And Leo's been working so closely with Zillow. Honestly, Zillow was the impetus for us with the single property buyer broker. We wanted them to adopt ours. And so let's talk real quickly, Leo, about first showing and the single property buyer broker. Any scripts that you've come across that you really liked, anything that as far as feedback here?
Yeah, so this is probably the first thing you guys all personally reached out to me that weekend that we saw the moves for the very first time. The NAR Settlement states that you need a signed buyer representation agreement prior to touring property, which is a pretty big departure from what was in the few states that had it, which was prior to executing a purchase contract. And that weekend, as Holly and I were preparing to talk with us, we just put ourselves back in buyer agent mode, and shoving an 8-page, 10-page, 12-page contract written in legalese with a stranger, a signed call, a portal call. They have it. There's no rapport. Seemed virtually impossible. And so that's where we created the single page buyer representation agreement, which in our mind could be a part of a process, right? We talked about on the March call, a low commit, medium commit, high commit, meaning it's like the first date. If there's chemistry, then the agent can choose to work with the consumer, and the consumer can choose to work with the agent. My first ask to Zillow was use ours. They came out with their touring agreement, which is probably the lowest commit. But again, they view it as a pathway to potentially get to another one. Zillow has officially sanctioned ours as completely an okay with their process. So again, if you work with Zillow and they're telling you have to use theirs, ours is 100% approved to be used as the very first point of contact. And if you have an issue with that, reach out to me on Workplace or forward me an email that I can get to Zillow. Pass it back to you, Holly.
Absolutely. So a couple quick questions in chat. If you represent a buyer broker, or if you represent a buyer, your buyer broker agreement is very much like a listing agreement. It will need to be uploaded into SkySlope. And so we've been working behind the scenes with SkySlope for the last, oh my goodness, year, very diligently to help with this new technology and workflow. So being released next Friday will be kind of like how you do your listing agreement and you upload it to SkySlope. You'll be able to do the same with your buyer broker, which will allow us to stay in compliance with all state rules, because anytime a contract is signed between the brokerage and a client, we have to have broker review on that. And so that will be in SkySlope Live on Friday, the 15th. and your broker teams will be doing lots of training around it. But if you only represent the seller, we are not going to require a copy of the buyer broker from the other side. That's none of our business. Unless they give it. If they give it, cool, upload it, that's fine. But I'm not going to ask for it. That's just kind of crazy. Also, let's talk about Shawami and showing services real fast. I know a lot of you who are incredibly busy have maybe leveraged this service. To hit it head on, we had worked out originally with this service, they may only use EXP agents for EXP listings. If you have somebody not with our brokerage showing, basically we've got an agency conflict, they're creating sub-agency, that's a whole nother litany of issues. Give me a call, we'll walk through it, we'll fix it. But the other piece of it is, if you're using Shawami and that agent goes out and shows on your behalf, they have to have a signed buyer broker before they go, or a touring agreement before they go through that property. If they don't, they'll be in violation and could potentially be fined. And so I really want to avoid fines for all of our agents. Like, y'all work really hard for your money. I want to keep it in your pocket and not going to the MLS. So we really, if you are a touring agent, if you go out and you work for Shawami and in showing properties, you've got to have maybe that single property buyer broker. But remember, now we've got a conflict as to who gets paid, because the agent who sent it through Shawami is not necessarily the one writing the offer, is not necessarily the one who showed it. Procuring cause is gone, y'all. Like, it's gone, like the dinosaurs. So as a result, how are you going to do your business? How are you adjusting? I want you to be really thoughtful about how you go forward and the tools that you use. There's a lot of really good, bad ideas right now, and we're going to pick through those together one at a time. Love, love, love this. Okay, so non-exclusive. The EXP buyer broker is a non-exclusive agreement. It provides for, we have to participate in showing the property. It's kind of that mid-level, as Leo said. So we've got the single property, we've got the non-exclusive, and some of you are super passionate about using the exclusive buyer broker. Your associations have come out with that. I will say this, we're getting a lot of recognition by the Consumer Federation of America. They are the ones that helped with the truth in lending statements in 2017 to make them readable. They lobbied the lending industry. They put they're this very powerful watchdog group. They have a lot of eyeballs, AARP, etc. We started working with them to make sure that we were consumer focused and speaking in such clarity that why wouldn't people work with us? And that's where we were acknowledged for both our single property as well as our buyer broker. And now most recently, yesterday, our listing agreement. It was upheld as the model listing agreement to aspire to. So yay, EXP. That's why I say the non-exclusive is out there for you. That is our buyer broker. And then of course, if you decide to go exclusive, please define your time period. In some states, that's limited to no more than 90 days. It could be for a property type. It could be for a set fee or service. So definitely want you to keep in mind. All right, let's go next. So representing a buyer on my listing, we talked about buyer services. Speaking on agency, this is a script we've worked on in the past. In our state, you get to choose your agent. And remember, I'm going to outline how we work together, and I'm going to do so in writing. But until you sign a document, please make sure you don't share anything that could be used against you in a negotiation, like why you're moving, when you have to be in by, how you're paying for the house, any terms and conditions that you need. Because when you do that, if you're working with the listing agent, they may not offer you agency. They may not protect you in a negotiation. And what I found, guys, in using this script, oh my goodness, it's been so helpful agency-wise. Most buyers traditionally only interviewed one agent. What I have found in using this, I won more listings and more seller and more buyers by just explaining agency in a way that it was like, well, yeah, I need somebody protecting me. So just something to think about there. All right, let's talk about next. Giving options for FHA and VA. And Leo, this is something we've talked a lot about because folks are really nervous about our first time home buyers, our cash poor home buyers. Right? They're really nervous. So what I would say in getting that buyer broker signed, and you can do this in additional terms, is one, authorize me to contact the seller directly for a compensation agreement or the listing brokerage. Or I will negotiate my fee strategically in the contract as part of your concessions. Put this in writing. You can totally do this. It makes a difference. And what we're finding right now, and if you're going to take to social media, start talking to these folks who maybe have been on the fence. They were watching interest rates go up. They're a little bit nervous. They're seeing interest rates may come down, not today because the Fed is holding steady. But if they see rates come down, help them get off the fence and know how to leverage you as the professional. If you're looking at doing anything right now, it's talking directly to the consumer. Stop talking to other agents who think the sky is falling. Talk to the consumer about how you help them get into homes. That's the key in all of this. Leo, you want to jump in on anything?
Sorry, I just went through a patchy spot. Guys, this is so important. And as you recall, in March, I called the VA directly. They rolled out an option, and this form passes the mustard for both FHA and VA underwriting guidelines. So the official govies are saying if the contribution from the seller is going to the buyer broker, we're going to view it just as we did before. And this does not affect contributions to the seller for closing costs, as we're extremely well versed in the understanding VA buyers are not allowed to pay for anything out of pocket. So this was super important that we got, and we actually got this form done about a month or two ago, way ahead of the process. And that's the form we also modified for seller directed buyer compensation.
We're going to share this slide deck with you all. We're going to share this recording with you all. And quite frankly, our marketing team, led by the amazing Wendy, she is at the ready. As soon as this recording is over, we're going to splice it up and it's going to be all over EXP social media so it can be shared. What I want to empower you all with right now is you are the choir. Now is the time to start singing. Your empowerment and understanding what's next is going to make all the difference. That's how we go boldly forward, is your confidence in understanding that, hey, I don't have to have all the answers today, but you know what? I know my company has my back. I know my broker team has my back. Leo and Holly have my back. That's the opportunity. And so I want you to start talking to people in such a way that, you know what? Things are changing, but let me show you how I can help you buy. Let me show you how I can help you sell. That's the magic of where we're at right now. And I know it's hard. It's a little uncomfortable, especially when you look at the clickbait that is out there. So focus on the people who need you, because that's where we're really going to get to and make a difference. So I'm going through a lot of this. Reagan, we're going to drop these scripts and everything to you as everything. Now, Morris Lucas, I love this question. Can an agent on a team show a property on the team's behalf, although the buyer broker is with the team lead? I'm going to say it depends. Best case scenario is you put anybody who's going to be showing. So if I'm the team leader and you're my buyer's agent on the team, I'm going to put both of us on the buyer broker, so we're covered. But I'm also hearing that some states or MLSs are recognizing everybody in the brokerage. Okay, cool. I think it's just going to depend on agency in your state. If you have designated agency, we definitely need both names. If you have dual agency, we may, I'm going to use air quotes there, may be okay. So definitely huge. Dennis, love this question. Can buyers cancel the buyer broker agreement? Yeah, just as a seller can cancel the listing. Best practice is going to be in writing. And if you are under contract with a buyer, you still get paid. They can cancel, but you still get paid. If they cancel before you go under contract, if you're using ours, they can just walk away. Good luck. Have a day. But if you're using the exclusive from your association, the verbiage is different. Sometimes you have to both agree to cancel, just like you would for a seller. Great question. Agent power huddle, do we have to re-sign the listing agreement? No, just do the amendment to the listing agreement. We've got that, and I'm going to drop this FAQ with all of our docs again for you. So you've got the links, and this the amendment to the listing agreement is also in SkySlope for you. Love this. George's question above. I'm looking for George's question. If I can find it. I'm so sorry. It's taking me a moment to find George's question. Okay. I see you, George. All right. George's question says, can we collect 6% for representing the seller and then also agree to adjust down based on contracts received? George, you need to charge what makes sense and then what your seller agrees to. So I don't care if it's 6% or 10% or 2%. You need to do what is best for your business in the market you work in. That's what we want to empower you as a company. And then the buyer will show up with their agent and they will find a way to pay their agent. We just don't want you sharing any of your listing commission with a buyer broker. We want to work in terms of the settlement, and that's what our focus is. So I hope that that's answering your question. Now, one of the things that we've heard a lot about is, hey, can I adjust my buyer broker commission? If I'm representing a buyer and I've got, and I'm going to throw out real numbers, so have a day. If I'm representing a buyer and I say that my commission is 2.5%, and we go, and I know we're going to go look at new construction, and the new construction is offering 4% to a buyer's broker, and I can adjust my commission up in writing on the buyer broker and say, okay, if it's resale, it's 2.5%. If it's new construction, it's 4%. And if either of those is too high, we will negotiate or have a conversation at the time to come down, but I will not take more. So you can put two different numbers on your buyer broker. You can also have multiple buyer brokers for the same client. Maybe you have one for new construction. Maybe you have one for land. Maybe you have one for residential resale. Totally up to you. See, this is the thing. Empower the buyer by having the conversation up front, because everybody's warm and fuzzy. You're getting to know each other. Life is good. When you get messy in the middle and then you try to renegotiate, things get harder, because the buyer may say, okay, I'll allow you to collect the 4%, but half of it's mine on that new construction.
Let's just expand out. Yep, just expand on that a little bit. So the one thing that the settlement agreement articulates in black and white is no variability. So what you can't do is, I want a guarantee of 2%, but I'm going to take whatever I can get above that. That is not allowed. So what Holly said, if you say, I will do it for X, and by the way, they're offering more, a question that keeps coming up, and again, I'm being very clear with the way I'm answering it, is as of today, on the date of this recording, we've been advised that through an amendment and the buyer agent agreed upon in writing, you can actually amend it. And again, this is super clear. The settlement wants the consumers to be able to negotiate at any and all parts of the situation. And again, we fully expect that some buyers will say, sure, I'll split it with you, or you explained it, and you explained that could be for you. Again, the consumer needs to be able to have the opportunity to negotiate. Then the second thing is, you can have a menu of choices. So not variability where you say, I get anything between X and Y. If you want to spell it out, I get this for this and I get that for that. We've been advised that that is acceptable at the current time. So I appreciate everyone's detail to this. This is extremely confusing because the way the settlement agreement was worded. One paragraph literally contradicts the next paragraph. So this is a business decision we made to keep you guys as protected as possible, as we truly believe that there are plaintiffs' attorneys, the lawyers who are looking for a payday from this industry. who are going to be looking and secret shopping agents starting August 17th. So we took the very specific stance of what is the way to protect you guys as agents, ourselves as a company, and make it fair for consumers while still giving you all the tools to market properties the best possible way for the seller. Because we do believe that buyer representation and seller directed compensation is a very powerful tool. I believe that buyer broker commission, I've said this on earning calls, I've said it on many stages, is lead gen marketing demand. You are now employing all of the buyer agents in your market to help you sell that listing. And sellers understand that, and listing agents that can articulate that need to articulate that because it's super important. But a couple parting words is we're all in this together. We have your backs. You guys can absolutely share this internally, externally. Look for all the content I continue to share, whether it's on our platforms or external platforms. I put out a video. I filmed a video with Tom Ferry yesterday that's going to be coming out today. It's about a 20-minute one where I hit a lot of these points. So hang in there, everybody. I promise you 60, 90 days, we'll have actually forgotten about this because there's a new normal and we realize the sky didn't fall. But I also implore you guys to have a lot of empathy and grace for everybody. The reason why everybody's so upset and in such arms and it's such a hot topic is because people are scared that they won't have the ability to feed their families. And that is a real fear that you have to respect and appreciate. But I'm seeing a lot of comments on social where people are saying they got it right. Let's be on the right side of this. Let's not create more liability for our entire industry. With that, I arrived where I'm supposed to be. If you guys have anything, if there is somebody who's confused, who is creating problems in your market, me or Holly will jump on the phone with them. We continue to do that. So we have your backs. Let's keep moving forward.
Absolutely. Guys, a couple of things, because I know there's still questions coming in. So Leo, thank you. Go have a blast with our agents locally. What you can expect from us, we're going to continue to update and roll out localized custom forms. We recognize that real estate is so incredibly local, and we are in some states that require very specific language. I'm looking at you, Kansas and Missouri. And so we will have those forms for you very shortly. New Jersey, also, we've got an addendum for you that's rolling out. Listing toolkit enhancements, that's being launched later this week with our fantastic marketing department who's been hard at work, and I really can't thank them enough. Our buyer toolkit has been live and been shared around the industry. Keep sharing that. We are going to continue to double down and enhance that as the need arises. Then also be looking for local and national training. It's not just Leo and I that are doing these. All of your state brokers are very passionate in your success and what to do with forms that you've gotten local, also MLS rules, all of those things. So please, if you haven't already, tap into your state broker teams. They're doing things live. They're doing things online. We want to make it so convenient for you. And of course, eXp University, we've got a whole new series called Masterclass rolling out. And that launches, the very first one is going to be live on August 15th at noon Pacific. And that's going to be about winning buyers. We don't have the sexy title yet, but that's coming very soon for you. So we have your back. Guys, we're in this together, and we want you to know that we're going to do this well, and we're going to do this at a super high level to take care of you as you build your business, because of course, we are where the pros go to grow. Thank you so much for your time this morning. If you have questions, please reach out. And guys, happy Thursday.